Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. In this episode, I'm joined by Warren McKee. Warren has an incredible story. An Iraq War veteran who lost everything to PTSD, addiction and homelessness, yet ultimately rebuilt his life as a successful and inspiring entrepreneur. Welcome, Warren.
Hey, Phil. Thanks for the intro.
So, you were a veteran. You were in the Iraqi War in 2007. What happened there? And, tell us about your experiences.
Yeah, I think some people are hardwired for those experiences, right? War, guns, explosions, all that good stuff. And then people like me who perhaps are a bit more sensitive than that type of person, we aren't necessarily wired for that. And I think in my case, it was a combination of factors, right? One, I'm not wired for war, like maybe some people are. But on top of that, complex PTSD, right? So when you have PTSD at some point in your life, which can often be invisible, you don't know it's there. Everything feels normal. You don't even realize you have a thing. And then later on in life, another traumatic event happens. So you have basically PTSD twice or more. And then boom, all that old stuff just erupts like a volcano. And for me, that's exactly what happened. I wasn't wired for that. I constantly felt like an outsider. Then I go to war and everything just blows up in my face, and actually none of that happened until I got back, really. In the war, I felt kind of fine. But when I got home, trying to get back to, I guess, a family life, normalcy, none of that made sense to me. I couldn't make any of the pieces work.
So how did it begin to kind of unravel for you?
Well, initially when I came back, I just felt off, like something was wrong, but I didn't know what, didn't know how to do anything about it. And I don't really think there's a really good safety net there to catch people. I mean, you're also kind of trained to hide things, right? You're looked down upon if you have problems, if you can't hang, right? What's wrong with you? And all these other guys are doing just fine. So, I wasn't really talking about what was going on. And I found myself sitting in the basement of my house at the time and sitting in the dark, not really having any useful or even memorable thoughts. Suicide came up a lot, I think. And I had my two young boys. So at the time, I think they're 3 and 1 or 4 and 2. And I just, not only could I not feel connected to myself, I couldn't feel connected to them. I couldn't feel connected to anything. And, that was tricky. Really, really, really tricky.
So you weren't really functioning then as a human being by the sounds of it?
No, definitely not. And it was definitely something where I was trying to make things work, but for whatever reason, could not. I mean, I just couldn't. I was avoiding the pain. I was numbing it. I couldn't do any of that stuff. All I could do was try to keep trying to ignore the problem, really. And on the outside looking in, I think other people probably thought I was functioning just fine because a lot of this nobody was really aware of it. I mean, I'm sure my now ex-wife, then wife, was suspecting something was up because I wasn't my old self anymore.
And did you use, coping mechanisms for that? I mean, what did you find yourself doing?
I did. I used alcohol. It was pretty much straight edge before I went to the war. I didn't really drink. I didn't really do stuff. And when I came back, I went from that to drinking pretty regularly, checking out to electronics, TV, video games, pornography, probably my phone too, if I think about it. Mostly that, just anything I could to not be in my own experience.
So presumably that wasn't really sustainable existence. So what kind of happened?
Yeah. So initially, my then wife and I don't know if my family was really aware of it, but she and I were fighting a lot. And that led very shortly after I got back. It must have been like maybe a few months. I left to go to a friend's house to stay there. And had this really dramatic falling out where she jumped on the back of the car to try and prevent me from leaving. Like pretty wild stuff that you see in movies and you think this isn't real life. And turns out real life is usually more bizarre than movies. But, I went to stay with that friend and not to blame anyone but myself, but just started smoking weed, which in a way did help. I mean, it made everything okay, but it also was just another form of the same problem, right? Coping and ignoring that that there actually was a problem. And then, you know, of course, the friends I was saying were single guys. So we all started drinking daily together, having a good time, that kind of stuff, which made it really easy to ignore there was a problem. But obviously that can't go on forever. And then I found myself, you know, exploring with psychedelics, you know, basically anything I could get my hands on, because, you know, once you're used to doing one coping mechanism, eventually it stops working. So then you just turn to other coping mechanisms. And then it's like a snowball. So it's not like I can blame weed or alcohol. It's more like they just stopped working. So I tried other things. And then it became where I was taking psychedelics like 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 times a week. Oftentimes, you know, there was a tolerance. It wasn't even working, just wasting these substances, but just literally trying to get my hands on different things to try and unconsciously, of course, right? There was no thought process here. It wasn't like, oh, I'm doing this because I feel pain. It was more like, oh, this is fun and better than everything else I'm doing.
So you're kind of free falling by the sounds of it. Where was the bottom?
Yeah, the bottom was, you know, I rolled my car. Well, part of the bottom, it's like a series of events really, but I rolled my car. The police arrested me. They found drugs in my car. So I got a drug possession felony for, I think, Adderall and marijuana. And then, you know, instead of facing and mind you, I was a military police officer in the Army before all of this. So it's just like such a 180. But from that strange straight edge place, getting arrested, then running from, not really running, but just not facing the deal that I had a warrant for my arrest, didn't show up for court. And I think I did that for like 4 years, something like that, and found myself in Texas where I knew one person that I kind of knew, who was a boy, maybe ex-boyfriend at the time, to a woman I knew, and crashing on his couch, borrowing a car that didn't work, and, you know, trying to hop around from place to place, but not really having a home, living out of a backpack, didn't have any more belongings really, using a styrofoam cooler to transport food. And I remember one time when I really just realized how bad it was, I was driving to try and find a place to sleep, because I was trying not to be a burden to this person who's letting me stay on his couch. And the car stalled out every time I went to a light or a stop sign or stopped for any reason. It's so frustrating. And I'm at a stoplight at a major intersection in Austin in July or August. Super hot out. People are honking as if that's going to magically make the car start. And, you know, I got the hood up. I'm trying to get the car to start. I'm doing anything I can think of to get it to go again, messing with the throttle. And I just remember thinking, you know, I've created all of this. This is all my fault. This is my responsibility. And I think that's as low as it got, really. I mean, running from the cops, have a warrant for my arrest, no possessions really other than some clothes, and borrowing a car from a friend. Well, not really a friend, a guy who started sleeping with my then girlfriend turned ex-girlfriend. I mean, it was just like Jerry Springer made real.
Was that was there a turning point? Was there a kind of tipping point where you thought, you know, enough is enough?
Well, once I started taking responsibility, I also realized that if I didn't do something, just the volume of times a day I would think about suicide or maybe self-harm or just dark thoughts, that if I didn't do something right then, literally anything that I could think of might help. I wasn't sure at the time that I would probably end up just killing myself. And I thought about that a lot, right? Like there's only so many places to go from living out of a car in a place where I don't know anyone. The only people I really know weren't really my friends anymore. You know, ex-girlfriend sleeping with my former best friend. I just couldn't see how it could get any worse other than death. Because I did have the at least wherewithal to not get into like heroin, crack, or meth, but pretty much everything else, cocaine, MDMA, constant alcohol abuse, psychedelics, escaping from reality. I just knew where else could I possibly go, right? There's only a couple steps between me and death. and I didn't want to die. I didn't, want to be this person anymore. And I decided to do something about it, to try and make my situation better, mostly because I don't think I had a choice.
So that must have been tough if you're that kind of low. I mean, how do you take the first steps in a different direction?
Well, initially it came down to, I don't know that back then I thought of it this way. I mean, I was aware of the concept, but like sober, regular thoughts were difficult. Kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I knew I had to get my basics covered, so I had to figure out food. I had to, swallow my pride, get food stamps. I started signing up for any job I could get. Dishwashing was one I did a lot because, it doesn't really require experience. Somehow no one knew I had a warrant in another state. So I guess that didn't come up in background checks. I have no idea, to be honest, but, or they just ignored it because it was drug possession and they didn't care. I don't know. And, trying to talk to friends, get multiple jobs. I actually got lucky because I found out about something called clinical trials, which is basically where you take experimental drugs to tell big pharma what the side effects are, right? So I remember taking something like, I think it was like heart disease or maybe diabetes. And I got into this one that I think was like 2 to 3 weeks long. And you're basically locked into a place where you can't do drugs. You have to be sober to get into it in the first place. So I forced myself to be sober, stop doing drugs. I don't even know how I even afforded it back then, to be honest. And I'm in there and I talked to a guy at lunch who's in this clinical trial with me. We're locked in there for 3 weeks. And we started talking about, and I didn't want to talk about how bad my life was, of course. But so we talked about, the philosophy of psychedelics, certain things that were healthy and actually did help, but they weren't enough, right? I had to do the work too, and I wasn't. Like dimethyltryptamine, DMT, psilocybin, some of these things that I actually did feel help from. And then, I would turn around and light my life on fire again. But, he and I got talking about this, and he mentioned, ayahuasca, different plant medicines, things that you really can't do for fun. Like, I just can't imagine having fun with these things. And I haven't had fun with these. They're always very painful and life-changing. And when we got out of there, I befriended him. And I stayed sober because I kept trying to do these clinical trials and was trying to get a job, again, covering the basics, food, water, shelter. And he and his wife, I think they weren't married yet at the time, his fiance, girlfriend, whatever, they invited me to come stay with them because they could see that I was struggling. And I was at the point where I was about to, give up, go move in with my parents because I was actually sober enough to pull that off. And they said, hey, why don't you come stay with us? And then they influenced me, obviously, in a lot of really good ways. Yeah, Jordan was his name, really good friend. He had struggled with addiction himself and overcame it. And that for him at that point in time had been years. So, it wasn't something new for him. But I remember feeling like this is the first person in a long time that was more like brotherhood and had healthy influence, which of course his influence led to more good things happening. Right. And I found about coaching, specifically a man named Jason Gaddis. He runs the Relationship School. He's like a really popular podcast too, called Smart Couples Podcast. And I remember doing some of his homework with them. They were doing like a pre-recorded class, and I had gotten back together with my then ex-girlfriend for the 5th time or so. And I'm trying this with her, and I'm trying to do this assignment. And it was the only thing I'd ever tried where it wasn't just like a work skill or, something that makes you make money. It was a life skill, a self-improvement thing, which I'd never really tried before, not intentionally. And I remember just thinking, wow, that worked immediately. I was able to talk through some stuff with her that I felt struggled by. And it's just like a basic listening skill exercise. And man, that opened my eyes.
What about the PTSD? I mean, how do you think that, first of all, impacted on your spiral down? But then how did you become aware that you were suffering from PTSD?
Well, once I found coaching, I realized if I want to have a serious life with, regular human being stuff, like not worrying about the police every time they're behind you because you have a warrant for your arrest, I got a lawyer. I was working 4 jobs. Luckily, I had affordable rent in Austin, thanks to Jordan and his now wife, Ember. And, I was facing the music. Decided, okay, like a year or two later, this was because I had to, save money up, pay some bills off, get my head on straight, stay sober. And I went to court. They arrested me again because I'd been avoiding the police for a couple of years at the time with this warrant for my arrest. And it turns out that finally facing the music was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it forced me to get into a program for veterans. There's actually a court called Veterans Court. A lot of states have it. I'm not sure how they do it in other countries, but in the United States, at least, there's Veterans Court, which it's basically like a second chance. A lot of those guys were in there for DUIs, things like that. And so that meant I had to go into group therapy. I had to sign up for some kind of, actually several group programs and one-on-one therapy. And I did both. And I had to do community service. And because I then found coaching, I'd learned about relationship skills. It was the thing that was missing for me. I wasn't connected to anyone. So when I fell through the cracks, well, there was no one there to catch me. And I knew I had to work on that. Otherwise, I'd probably end up back where I was at some point eventually, because I could tell it would get hard again. So when I'm in therapy, I'm talking to the therapist who was also a veteran. He was part of the Vet Center, which is like a treatment program for vets. And, in group therapy, I'm hearing people talk about, how'd you get arrested? What was the thing that led to this? What was that like for you? It just really normalized that a lot of us have forms of PTSD or different various things, maybe even just symptoms of this if we don't want to go as far as saying we have a diagnosis. And just kind of opening my eyes to how many of us are just brainwashed to not deal with it. Sometimes, they never get out of that. And I have friends who committed suicide over the last, 5 years or so, maybe 5-10 years, who they never dealt with it because, again, we're brainwashed to just ignore it. But being in these group therapy, being in one-on-one therapy, and then given an opportunity to choose my own community service where I taught these relationship skills to other veterans. And a lot of these, actually all of these guys were Vietnam era vets. None of them were like my age or anything. So I'm teaching these guys who had been through this shit. One of them had schizophrenia. It was so hard to work with these guys, but it also showed me, this is just a reflection of myself. And this is how bad it could have gone had I not done something, it's just completely life-changing.
And why do you think, you said we're brainwashed to not kind of deal with PTSD. Why do you think that is?
Well, if you're sitting here expressing something like weakness, especially when you're supposed to be at the ready, deployable, right, ready to go to war whenever they choose to do that, I imagine that it's kind of hardwired in. I don't know if that it's intentional, of course, but if it works, why fix it, right? And, at one point in time, there was, I think like a veteran was killing themselves every 54 minutes. That's what the numbers broke down to, at least in the United States. And, that's after they've been deployed. That's after they've done their service. That's after they usually, I don't even think a lot of these, and some of them are in the military, but I think a lot of them are out of the military. They get out and they just can't escape the monkey on their back, right? This thing that's constantly following them. And frankly, there's little political gain to attack this thing, right? It doesn't affect most voters. It doesn't affect most people. I think I looked this up not too long ago. There's in the United States, 8% of people are veterans, which means you're either in the military or you were in the military. So it's not a lot of people. And I think less than 3 or 4% of people are active in the military of the population. So it's not a lot of incentive, right?
So what do you do? People listening to this, maybe they're in the military, maybe they weren't. If they're, they're feeling like they may have suffering from PTSD or something's not right, what's the kind of first step you can take in terms of trying to, find some sort of way forward?
For me, and for the guys I worked with, and it was mostly guys or women too, I think it comes down to just get real, man. Like, get real about how your experiences in or out of the military, because for me, it was both, right? They combined together to just utterly destroy me. If you're not even real about how this might impact how you treat your kids, how you treat your wife or husband, how you show up as a human being, how do you deal with problems in your life? Do you deal with problems, or are you stuck in an avoidant pattern? I think if you can't even get real, no amount of therapy is really going to work. No program's going to work. Drugs, I definitely don't work. And I have friends who were dead because they kept trying to do that. And it's, I hate to say it, but like, you gotta look in the mirror and stop making excuses, stop finding ways to avoid, and start just at least looking at, how is this impacting me? Because for me, it was self-awareness, like looking at, okay, how has this impacted me? Well, I went from, I graduated top of my class in my degree program in college for IT stuff. And, I started to understand how to make friends. My family at the time, probably not anymore, considered me the golden child. Obviously something changed. I'm not the same anymore. I couldn't really do a good job keeping friends anymore. My relationships all failed. My kids were young, but it was really hard to feel connected to them because I didn't know how to be connected to myself. And then until the moment where I actually looked at that rather than ignored it or suppressed it or dissociated from it, I don't think anything would change, Actually, it's two-part. I think it's self-awareness, but it's also, you have to take responsibility. It is so easy to point at war. I mean, I think maybe sexual and violence, sexual assault, things like that. Some of these things are the easiest things in the world to blame our behavior on. It is so easy. And it was so easy for me to say, yeah, I went to the war. I'm fucked up. Oh, well, and I got a divorce. Damn ex-wife. Blame her for all my problems. Blame the deployment. Blame my messed up childhood. And it made it easy for a while. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not the problem. But the truth is, no one made me join. No one made me go to war. I could have found a way out if I wanted to. No one made me get married. No one made me get a divorce. My ex-wife doesn't control me. My childhood, although it influences me, doesn't make me make the choices I do. I make those choices. Jocko Willink talks about this, Navy SEAL turned trainer, coach, many other things too. It's mind control. Are you in control of your mind, or are you letting your mind control you?
And can you do this on your own though? Do you need help from others? I mean, you had somewhere to stay, your friends looked out for you, and, you started the coaching, and that kind of helped you find a way forward. But is this something you can cope with by yourself? Do you need to share it at least and find help?
I don't think it's possible. I think we're human beings, we're mammalian, we're packed animals. We need other human beings. And frankly, I know I've said this a few times, but I'm going to keep saying it. Everyone I know that tried to do it on their own is either dead or I have no idea what happened to them. They might be dead. I don't know what's going on. Their lives are probably not ideal. They're not living their best life, as one might say. And all the people I know that just got honest and talked about it and started seeking help and opening up about it. Those people, especially me, most of us have improved our lives. Most of us have been able to turn it around. And it's not just military folk, right? It's just, anybody who's got serious unresolved trauma. The more you hide it, the more it controls you. Actually, my mentor, who I work with as well, a good friend, Annie Lala, said it best. The more eyes you have on your shame, the less control shame has over you. And I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, that was the thing that changed my life, telling people, hey, I'm struggling. And then suddenly resources appear. Suddenly people show me they care. Suddenly I realize all these stories I have that I'm alone and no one gets it. There's something wrong with me. They start deflating. They start, it took time, but it started becoming, less that and more, this happens to other people. I'm not alone. I'm also not broken. I don't think I would say it is like fix this, but more like I can make things better. You never are done with it too, right? It's like an infinite onion. You unravel one layer, there's another layer of onion there, but it's with other people that we heal. And of course you can do things by yourself too, but it can't be just that. I don't think it works.
So you talked about, the importance of relationships earlier and understanding and more about how to invest in relationships. How do you use, what you learned anyway to kind of reconnect with important people in your lives and invest in your own relationships?
Well, I'd burned every bridge I had, and of course, right. That's a pretty typical story, I think, for drug addiction, and unresolved trauma, even if you don't have drugs. Not everyone's going to want to rebuild the bridge. And I had to accept that too. And there's a lot of people who probably never talk to me again. I mean, I have entire groups of people that probably will never see me as a good person. Right. And I had to accept that. So I'm going into reconnecting with people. It's not about, I need something from you. Because if you go from that, it kind of puts the onus on the other person who you may have already hurt to fix things. But instead, for me, I had to come from a place of radical responsibility. This was, I'm not going to, shame, blame, guilt myself, because I don't think shame goes anywhere other than back to hell. I think that it's more so just, again, get real. Hey, I was going through a very difficult time. I didn't know, nor had anyone probably in my family lineage know how to deal with this stuff. And I'm probably the first one that went this kind of route, right? Therapy, not dissociating, that kind of stuff. So I would come to people like my family and friends. And, a lot of people did open the door. And I just started with being real. Like, hey, I was struggling with some pretty serious stuff. We don't have to process that. I'm doing that on my own, but I want you to know that I see that had an impact on you. I had to say this to my own kids, and I've said it to them multiple times because I've screwed up more than once. Right. And I'm fallible. But that being real with them just totally opened the door. And it's funny because we think that, we see a lot of role models of people who don't do this, right? Like certain politicians might, never take responsibility. It's always the other party's fault. It's always whatever's fault. Or celebrities some celebrities anyways, some politicians do this. So we're shown this, and maybe our own family does it. But when you open the door to, I made a mistake, I'm working on it, and I'd like to reconnect with you. And I also accept your no. There's a certain power in that I don't see these people who, I'm not going to get into names or anything, but these people who don't do that, they don't have that power, right? They don't have the ability to go from mistake to recovery, because it's always a game of dodge, right? Like dodgeball, trying to dodge the blame or pass the blame or blame someone else. And that, my kids had a really difficult time, I think, figuring this out, because, it was in their life and they disappeared for years. But I think I'd have to ask them, because I don't know that I have done that, but I think it's that vulnerability. That's really what it breaks down to, I think, is vulnerability of, I'm a human being. I made mistakes. It was really hard for me. And I want you to know that I see it hurt you, and I'm okay if you never want to talk to me again. And I was at peace with that. Granted, it was incredibly painful and sad, and the thought of it even makes me choke up a bit. But I had accepted that, it's possible my kids may never want to talk to me again, or that maybe they'll get older and one day realize that's something they need. Accepting that and going with vulnerability changed everything.
And I know that you were saying that you can't blame your childhood or the fact that you went to war or various other things, it comes to you. Do you not see the PTSD as actually having a big part to play, though, in what happened to you, in your experience? And I know you said you're not hanging your hat on the fact that it was PTSD and you took no responsibility, but do you see the impact that might have had?
Absolutely. I did then and I do now. And it still affects me. I don't know that you just cure yourself of these things. It's just another layer every time. But I think there's a big difference between understanding your own psychology, such as a diagnosis, but really it's not a yes or no. It's a 0 to 100, right? And no one's probably a 0 PTSD and no one's probably 100 PTSD. You might be a 99. You might have a lot. You might be 10. You don't really have to deal with this stuff. And that's, I think, true with most diagnoses. And when I start to see it that way, not only does it help me have empathy for myself and other people who are struggling, but it also helps me start to look at, okay, well, what of these diagnoses, whatever they are, what symptoms am I struggling with? Can I say yes if I look at a checklist, for example, right? Stepping away from like the DSM, at least in American therapy, where I have to give you this thing in order to have your insurance cover the, the therapeuticization. That's, I think there's a lot of nonsense in there, but there's also a lot to be gained. Okay, well, if I do have this thing, PTSD, what can I learn about it? Because I can't fix something like a mechanic. I can't fix something unless I understand it. If I'm looking at an engine trying to tweak it and modify it, well, I don't even know what's wrong with it. Well, then first I'm probably going to try and, ask the owner of the car what happened, start the car, do all these things and learn about it. And I think it's like that. Like I'm trying to be a mechanic in my own brain. I don't blame the car for breaking down because that just happens, right? It's just a part of what happens. And if I'm sitting here saying, like cars are bad and the cars are the reason I have a problem, well, then, I might have to look in the mirror and say, well, did you change the oil? Did you change the fluids? Did you swap the battery out every several years? So I try to really avoid blame of any kind and lean into responsibility. So when I say I have PTSD, I'm very cautious to look at it from the lens of, and that makes it okay that I do the things I do that I'm not proud of, but rather than it's just a tool to understand myself and others.
And how do you, and this is for the benefit of people listening as well who might suffer from PTSD, how do you maintain, how do you manage it on an ongoing basis? Because I imagine it, as you said, it's on a scale, 0 to 100. How do you, this is a lifelong condition, I guess, how do you manage it on a daily, weekly, basis?
I look at, I was coaching people for a long time, so I had to come to terms with this because everybody's got a thing, right? I am this way because of reasons. And to every person, those reasons are usually pretty powerful. You might say PTSD, or you could just go straight to the trauma because my childhood, because my ex-wife, my ex-husband, whatever. And I think that, once you have your reasons figured out, your diagnosis, your whatever, this list of symptoms, your battle. And everybody's got a battle. So if you know what your battle is, it's easy to fall into life, the thought that life gets easier as you get older, but in reality, it gets harder. And it never stops. So if I know, in my case, having PTSD, I have to look at it like, okay, well, if I conquer the mountain of, okay, now I don't snap at people anymore, which I used to do that a lot. I would just lose my temper and just lose my shit with people. And it wasn't really fair to them because they might just be asking a question and I just didn't have patience in that moment. But what's the next mountain, right? As soon as you get to one summit, well, that mountain was blocking the view of the next mountain. So it's easy to think, oh, I made it to the top, I'm done. But you have to accept that life will just continuously serve you challenges. And so will if you want to think of it this way, your mental illness, which I hate those words, but whatever it is you're dealing with, it's just going to continuously sculpt you into who you ought to be. And if you just continuously face the challenges, realizing that it's probably going to get harder, not easier. For me anyways, it's sort of like giving meaning to things. Because if life didn't get harder and my PTSD just went away one day and I didn't have problems, I don't know that I would actually be that great of a person. I think I'd probably be lazy and not want to accomplish anything. It's these challenges that make me. It's continuously forcing me to grow up.
That's really interesting. How part of you that perhaps you wish you hadn't got is actually something that is part of you and you wouldn't want to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't take any of this away, because let's say I didn't have PTSD and I didn't go to war and I didn't go through all this stuff. I don't think that life would make me very capable. Like I don't know if pity's the right word, but I feel bad for people who largely don't have challenges, who don't have. I obviously don't wish homelessness on anybody. I literally strive to try and help people prevent that. But whatever happened to you, good or bad, no matter how challenging, you can get to a point where you're grateful for it because it made you who you are. And for me, I feel like a fucking badass. I feel like I can face anything. I make really cool, interesting things in the world, and I get to interact with really intelligent, just like mind-blowing people, not because life was easy and I lucked out, which maybe some people might say that or think that, but because of the fact that these things happened. There's no way I'd get in the room, I think, with people like Eben Pagan, Annie Lala, Kevin King, some of these people I'm fortunate enough to do business with and just get to know and eventually befriend, if I hadn't had these things. And I think that's true for everybody, regardless of what your background is. It's that gratitude that keeps me going. I can blame it, which got me everything I already had years ago, and it wasn't anything good. Or I can, actually, I'll rephrase. I had a therapist say it best, just to bottom line it. You can't change what happened to you, but you can make meaning of it. That's how I feel about it.
So did coaching come naturally to you then? And it sounds like it did. And can you tell us more about, the coaching that you do and your approach?
I think the skill sets and techniques kind of more were natural for me. My dad was a mechanic, so I kind of have like this mechanical style brain that actually had a friend call me a people mechanic once. I love that. But that part did. But I think initially I was a terrible coach. My first 2 paid clients fired me. I didn't have any idea what I was doing because I didn't have people skills. I was so abrasive and direct, like a bull in a china shop, except in every conversation. And sometimes, you use the directness and sometimes use your empathy. But I didn't let that stop me, even though it hurt deeply when they fired me. And I just kept training myself. I kept trying to learn, okay, how do you not be an asshole? How do you not be so direct that people don't want to talk to you? You might have the right words, but you might have the wrong approach, sort of deal. But watching other people who are masterful at this, like Jason Gaddis, later on Annie Lala, Eben Pagan, and others too. There's just so many people that have influenced me. I'm very fortunate. But watching these masters who obviously put in, thousands of hours into this skill set, and watching them change someone who, in some cases, they're on the brink of divorce, or they've had or even just myself. I remember telling Annie once in a class that I had this traumatic childhood and I was holding on to it. And just through a series of maybe 15, 20-minute exercises, I was able to let go of something that I've been struggling with for years. And just seeing the potency of that skill in different ways too, for business, health, inner game stuff, outer game stuff. I knew that if I just kept going and kept trying, that I could do that for other people. Because frankly, I think it saved my life. I don't know where I'd be without it, or if I'd even be alive.
So how would you describe, for those people listening who don't know the difference between, say, therapy and coaching, and, what is it that you do? And from what you've just said, it sounds like it could be really useful to a lot of people who perhaps have not discovered it yet.
That's a good question. I think a lot of people have that question too, because you might say coach and they think football or soccer or something. And obviously that's not what we're talking about here. More so, the general term I think people use is life coach. But there's like a million kinds of coaches. But really the difference is in therapy, you're trying to, and you might ask 100 people, get 100 different answers. But my answer is therapy helps you deal with, accept, and perhaps make meaning of the past. I think the make meaning part is big for people, even if they don't call it that. You can make meaning of child abuse. That doesn't condone the behavior by any means, nor does it say people should go do that. But it does mean, well, how did that shape you? Who did that make you? How are you stronger? Someone who never dealt with that, they may not be as resilient. So there's like this piece around maybe processing is the word, and making peace with the past. Whereas with coaching, you might have elements of that, especially when you go into things like trauma-informed coaching, which is usually a coach who has gone through some kind of trauma training, usually a specific trauma like sexual or physical violence, things like that, dealing with narcissism. But it's more future focused. So instead of making peace with the past, which I think you need both, right? You need to do both of these things. Therapy was just as valuable as coaching for me, but eventually therapy could no longer serve me the way coaching did, which I did both for years and still do, or so coaching really. But for coaching, it's what's the future look like? Maybe you have a goal you want to accomplish. Well, how are you going to get there? And a good coach usually has experience in that arena, just like a good therapist usually has some kind of experience in whatever you're coming to them with. And so they can help you avoid certain pitfalls on the journey. But a really good coach, and I think this is, maybe a good therapist does this too, empowers you. They don't, like a consultant, tell you what to do. They help you find your own solutions. And then when they need to, they'll come and tell you the solution as well. Obviously, it has that element too. So it's the difference of, hey, because I work with business a lot. It's just because it's really interesting to me. And AI is such a fascinating field, which I use as a self-therapist and a self-coach. I might say to someone, instead of they might say, I'll give you an example here. How can I use AI in marketing? Or how could I use AI to help me with my PTSD? These are questions as a consultant, I could say, oh, step by step by step, this is what you do. But I think that everyone can figure shit out. I really do. I don't have special powers. I actually don't even think I'm that intelligent of a human being, especially when I look at some of the people I consider smart. I feel kind of dumb sometimes, So it's really like we're capable. We can figure it out. So instead of saying, okay, here's how you make therapist bot, or here's how you use AI to come up with your marketing funnel. The first thing I usually want to look at is working one-on-one with someone or group coaching. What do you think you could do? What have you already tried? What worked in the past? How could you use that now? What resources are available to you? And then when they need the help, okay, got it. You've never used ChatGPT before, as an example. I might show them how to do it. Okay, now that you know this, now what?
So are you saying then that there are similar approaches between the way that you would coach and work with someone who perhaps feels, lost or life feels pointless, and working with people in business? Is it kind of the same fundamentals in terms of, self? It sounds like it's kind of empowerment.
Empowerment is perhaps one of the most powerful things you can give someone, or I don't even think you give it to them really. You're just helping them realize it or remember it. Like, you're a badass. You forgot. That's okay. I'm here to remind you. And based on your specialty, right? Here are some things that can help you get there faster, smarter, more efficiently. And I think both a good therapist and a good coach has their versions of these things for sure.
So I'm interested, how do you link AI and kind of managing PTSD?
Yeah, I love this question actually, because I think about that among a million other AI applications often. Most people, I don't know if that's fair. A lot of people can't necessarily afford a therapist or a coach, or maybe their insurance only covers, I know I've gone through this back when I had normal insurance, from a job, that you can only get like 4 or 6 sessions, something like that. There's some bullshit made up number that an insurance company put on you. But who judges that you can, quote unquote, solve your trauma in 6 sessions? It's nonsense. And sometimes we don't have access to resources like that. So what do? Just tell your friends and commiserate? I mean, I've tried that too, and it can help, right? Being heard does help, especially if you're telling the right people. But for the first time in history, we have the cutting edge of technology available to anyone on the planet who has $20 a month available to them. And frankly, if you don't have $20 available, then it's time to look at other solutions for, like I did, right? I had to go get 4 jobs before I could afford a therapist, all that stuff, right? You got to make some commitment here and put some skin in the game. But generally speaking, that is accessible to everyone. So specific to PTSD, and ChatGPT is like $20 a month. I don't get a kickback from saying this. I wish I did, but it's like really affordable. $20 to use the most powerful invention of human history, more powerful than the computer by a factor of at least 10 to maybe 10,000. And this thing, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, whatever. I'm a fan of ChatGPT personally. They have an index of, for lack of a better word, in their brain, their hard drives, if you will, of most information that's ever existed, which no human being can do. It's not possible. That also means you can have access to every therapy or self-help or self-healing modality that's ever existed and been recorded on the internet. No therapist can do that. Hell, I can't do that. I don't even pretend to be an expert in AI, even less every single modality of therapy or coaching. So suddenly, in the last 2 years or so, now everybody can access that without having to go get a doctorate's degree. Now, I'm not saying that makes you a therapist by any means. Of course not. A therapist who also uses AI or a coach who also uses AI is a very, very powerful person indeed, versus a layman, a person who doesn't have experience with either of those things using AI, right? But let's say you can't afford it, like I did. God, I wish AI was back around then. I had to put my $20 in there, buy 2 to 3 list cups of coffee, whatever. In Austin, that's like half a meal. I would learn how to use it first. That's the first part. That's the only real barrier here. But once you do that, and there's so many free resources out there, there's so much stuff on YouTube, whatever. There's tons of things. Now you can make a machine, if you will, that talks to you and responds to you. In fact, it even has a voice, and the voice is so good, it is practically imperceptible that it's not a person. It's weird at first. Of course it is. So were computers. I remember when those came out. So were websites. I remember when those came out. People made it rich off that stuff, right? Now I can talk to something about my darkest thoughts. And this thing, especially if you understand how to use it first, because obviously that's important, just like you have to learn how to type to use a computer, I can tell it everything, and there's no fear of judgment. There's no fear of this thing's gonna somehow hurt me, because it can't. It's programmed specifically not to. And it can remember your conversations. Not only that, you can try different types of therapy modalities or coaching modalities and tell it to do that. Maybe you just do a little bit of research on Google and you find you like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, or you tried it and you're like, that's too energetic for me. Maybe I want coactive coaching, which is more practical, boots on the ground. But maybe you didn't like that. So you try a whole other thing. And you can do this for $20 a month as much as you want, unlimited. It makes it accessible to everybody.
If somebody's interested in this, how do you help them then? What does your organization do? How would they get in contact?
Yeah. I have a link to a workshop that I will make free to anyone who's listening. Normally it's $97. It's a 4-hour workshop. What we do is we teach people the basics of prompting, advanced prompting, and specifically how to make a coach bot. But you could just as easily apply the same things we train you on to make therapy bot, or help me stop fighting with my wife bot. And all you need to do is have a ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini subscription. You can pick whatever you want. It works on all of them. And in this workshop, which we try to do 1 or 2 a month, we not only give you these tools, but we actually make you use it. You have to play with this too. And then we give you feedback on your prompts. because prompting is the skill of the future. AI, the genie, it's out of the bottle, ain't going back in. So you might as well learn how to use it. Just like people had to learn to use computers. And then once you're having that capability, the next step is learning how far can you stretch this thing? Because it can do probably 100 to 10,000 times more things than you think it can.
And where does someone go? Well, I mean, we'll put links in the description. Where do people go find out about the course, the workshop?
Yeah, I'll have a link directly to the workshop, and I'll put a promo code with it. It's actually $1, just the way our software is set up. You have to pay $1 to get registered. So if you have $1, you can join us. And if you don't see the link for whatever reason, you can go to visions2ventures.com. And that has a bunch of free tools to help you get started. Anyone that's just got a little bit of dedication can take what we're giving you and do a whole bunch of cool stuff with any of these LLMs, large language models. That's what ChatGPT is, Claude, etc.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'll put those links, make those links available in the description. Let's finish then, Warren, if I may. Question about, advice that you might give to your younger self. If you could go back and speak to yourself when you're at your lowest point, what advice would you give yourself?
It's a good question. It's tricky because I'm trying to penetrate the mind of someone who is avoiding all things that help him. And I don't know that I would probably say anything. I don't know that he's open to it. Instead, I would just listen. I would want to know more. I'd be curious. I'd ask questions. I would hold space without giving advice, without judging, without telling him how to live his life. And I think most importantly, I would believe in him. I would love him. And I think that's something I truly lacked back then. How do you help someone who doesn't want to be helped? Love them. What's the opposite of addiction, right? Connection.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you for being really honest and open with us. That was really, really, inspiring. And good luck with the future.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I appreciate the time. It's been a blast.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you're a veteran and have been affected by Warren's story, then you can find out more about the mental health support services available on the US Department of Veteran Affairs website, mentalhealth.va.gov, or for more information on PTSD support, visit ptsdva.gov. If you want to find out more about how Warren can help you embrace the power of AI, visit his website, visions2ventures.com. And if you want to take up his offer of attending one of his 4-hour workshops for just $1 instead of the usual $97, then visit aimarketingkickstart.com and use the discount code WS96OFF. OFF. If you have a story to tell, you think your experience would help others, then please get in contact either via the website mid-lifemen.com or email me at midlifemen01@gmail.com. If you're listening and you like it, then please do rate and review the podcast. Helps raise our profile and reach more people. And then finally, there's now a book available called Men Speak Up, Journeys Through Mental Health, which is based on some of the stories from the podcast, and it's available to buy on Amazon and from other online bookstores.